The telegram bearing news of Theresa Greene's impending arrival fluttered in the wind as Brent Bailey stood on the dusty platform of Sweetwater Station, Wyoming Territory, 1878. His weathered hands, calloused from years of ranch work, clutched the paper with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The mail-order bride he'd written to for 6 months was finally coming. And despite his 32 years of stubborn independence, Brent couldn't deny the nervous flutter in his chest. The distant whistle of the Union Pacific locomotive pierced the afternoon air. Brent straightened his worn Sunday coat and adjusted his hat, suddenly conscious of his appearance. The small gathering of townsfolk pretended not to watch the tall, broad-shouldered rancher as he paced the wooden platform. "Settle down, Bailey," called Martha Wilson from the general store. "You'll wear a hole through those boards before she even arrives." Brent managed a tight smile. "Just making sure everything's proper, Martha." The train hissed to a stop, belching steam across the platform. Passengers began to disembark, first a traveling salesman, then a family with small children. Brent scanned each face anxiously. And then she appeared. Theresa Greene descended from the train with remarkable grace considering the height of the steps and her modest traveling dress. She was younger than her letters had suggested, perhaps 25, with chestnut hair pinned neatly beneath a simple bonnet. Her face, heart-shaped and delicate, bore an expression of cautious optimism as she searched the platform. Their eyes met, and Brent felt something shift inside him. He moved forward, removing his hat. "Miss Greene?" he asked, his voice surprisingly steady. She offered a small smile. "Mr. Bailey, I presume?" Brent nodded, suddenly tongue-tied. Her voice carried a slight Eastern accent, refined in a way that made him acutely aware of his frontier roughness. "Welcome to Sweetwater," he said finally, reaching for her trunk. "I hope your journey wasn't too difficult." "It was." "Educational," Theresa replied, a hint of humor in her eyes. "I've never traveled so far west before." Brent noticed her gloved hands clutching a small leather satchel with unusual protectiveness. "Is that all your belongings, Miss Greene?" A shadow passed over her face. "Just the essentials and some personal items. My trunk contains the rest." As he loaded her trunk onto his wagon, Brent couldn't help but notice the quality of the leather, expensive and well-crafted, with brass fittings that suggested it cost more than he'd spend on tack in a year. But it was not his place to question. The ride to Brent's ranch was filled with polite conversation about the scenery and the town. Theresa asked thoughtful questions about the area, the ranch, and the people, but Brent noticed she volunteered little about herself beyond what she'd shared in their correspondence. "The ranch isn't much compared to what you might be used to in Boston," Brent said as they crested a hill, revealing a modest but well-maintained homestead nestled in a valley. A 2-story cabin stood surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and pastures where cattle grazed in the distance. "It's lovely," Theresa said, and there was genuine appreciation in her voice. "So open and free." Brent felt a surge of pride. "Built it with my own 2 hands. Started with just the cabin 6 years ago. You've accomplished a great deal on your own." "Not entirely on my own. Neighbors help each other out here. Speaking of which, Mrs. Wilson from town has prepared supper for us. Thought you might appreciate a woman's cooking after the train food." Theresa's expression softened. "That was very thoughtful." As they approached the cabin, Brent found himself studying her profile. There was something in her posture, a tension, perhaps, that suggested she carried a weight beyond her visible luggage. "Miss Greene," he said carefully, "I know this arrangement is unusual. I want you to know there's no rush to the preacher. We can take time to know each other first." Surprise flickered across her face, followed by visible relief. "Thank you, Mr. Bailey, that's very considerate." "Brent," he corrected gently. If you're going to be living here, might as well use my Christian name." "Then you must call me Theresa," she replied with her first genuine smile since arriving. That night, after showing Theresa to the small bedroom he'd prepared his own room, while he would sleep in the spare room downstairs, Brent sat on the porch watching the stars. The mysterious woman who had traveled across the country to marry a stranger had indeed arrived, but he sensed she'd brought secrets with her. He wasn't wrong. Inside, Theresa locked her bedroom door and carefully opened her satchel. Beneath a false bottom lay documents and a small leather pouch. She emptied the pouch onto the quilt gold coins spilled out, catching the lamplight. Not her entire fortune, certainly, but enough to start again if necessary. The remainder was safely deposited in banks across 3 states under different names. Theresa Greene was not destitute, as she had implied in her letters. In fact, she was possibly the wealthiest woman in the territory if anyone knew to look for her, which was precisely what she was running from. The early morning light filtered through the curtains as Theresa woke to unfamiliar sounds: roosters crowing, cattle lowing in the distance, and the rhythmic chopping of wood. She dressed quickly in one of her plainest dresses, still finer than most frontier women would own, and made her way downstairs. Brent had already been up for hours, completing morning chores. He entered through the back door just as Theresa was examining the kitchen. "Good morning," he said, startled to find her already up. "Sleep well?" "Yes, thank you." It wasn't entirely true. The strange noises of the prairie night had kept her awake long after she'd hidden her valuables beneath a loose floorboard she'd discovered. "Usually have a simple breakfast." "Hope that suits you." Theresa rolled up her sleeves. "Please allow me, it's the least I can do." Brent hesitated. "You don't have to, I want to," she insisted. "I may not be an experienced ranch wife yet, but I do know my way around a kitchen." This was stretching the truth considerably. As the daughter of one of Boston's wealthiest merchants, Theresa had rarely set foot in a kitchen until her circumstances changed dramatically 3 months ago. But she had watched the cook enough to understand the basics, and the journey west had given her opportunities to observe ordinary women preparing meals. To Brent's surprise, she managed a respectable breakfast of biscuits and gravy. They weren't as light as Martha Wilson's, but they were edible, and the determination on Theresa's face as she worked touched something in him. "There's a social at the church tonight," Brent mentioned as they ate. "Thought it might be a good way for you to meet folks." Theresa's fork paused midway to her mouth. "So soon? I mean, I would be delighted, but I've only just arrived. Small towns run on gossip. Figure it's better to introduce you proper than let rumors start." She nodded slowly. "You're right, of course. I'll need to unpack my trunk to find something suitable." After breakfast, Brent brought her trunk into the bedroom. As he set it down, the latch shifted and the lid opened slightly. Theresa moved quickly to close it, but not before Brent glimpsed silk and fine lace inside clothing far too expensive for the modest schoolteacher she had claimed to be. His eyebrows rose slightly, but he said nothing as he left her to unpack. Alone again, Theresa sat heavily on the bed. She would need to be more careful. The story she had crafted of a spinster schoolteacher seeking a new life after her school closed wouldn't hold up to scrutiny if people saw her Boston finery. She selected her plainest dress for the social, though even this was made of finer material than most frontier women would ever touch. With careful adjustments and the strategic addition of an apron, she hoped it would pass without comment. The social at Sweetwater's small church was in full swing when Brent's wagon arrived. Lanterns illuminated the churchyard, where tables of food and punch had been set up. A fiddle player was tuning up on the steps. "Ready?" Brent asked, offering his arm. Theresa took a deep breath and placed her hand on his sleeve. As I'll ever be. The curious stares of the townsfolk followed them as they approached. Martha Wilson was the first to break away from a group of women, bustling over with a welcoming smile. "So this is the young lady. Welcome to Sweetwater, Miss Greene. We're all just dying to meet the woman who finally caught our Brent's eye. Thank you, Mrs. Wilson, and thank you for the wonderful meal yesterday." Soon Theresa was surrounded by the women of Sweetwater, bombarded with questions about her journey and her life back east. She navigated the conversation carefully, providing just enough detail to satisfy curiosity without revealing too much. The men pulled Brent aside, clapping his back and offering congratulations. "She's a real lady, Bailey," Sheriff Tom Collins remarked. "Bit fancy for these parts, ain't she?" Brent shrugged. "She's educated, was a school teacher." "Must have been a mighty fine school," observed Henry Morgan, the banker. "Those ain't exactly teachers' clothes." Across the yard, Theresa was facing similar observations. "Such lovely hands you have, dear," said Edith Parker, the preacher's wife. "Haven't seen a day's hard work, I'd wager." "I taught children their letters," Theresa replied. "Not much callous building in that." "Well, you'll toughen up soon enough on a ranch," Martha said with a laugh. "Brent works from sunup to sundown." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Theresa said with more conviction than she felt. As the evening progressed, the fiddler struck up a lively tune. Couples formed for dancing, and Brent approached Theresa with an uncertain smile. "Care to dance, Miss Greene? I should warn you I'm not especially graceful." Theresa hesitated only briefly before accepting his hand. "I'd be delighted, Mr. Bailey." Dancing was something Theresa knew well. Years of lessons and society balls had made her proficient in everything from waltzes to quadrilles. She instinctively began to follow Brent in a formal dance step before realizing the frontier style was considerably less structured. She quickly adjusted, following his lead. Brent was pleasantly surprised. "You dance well for a school teacher." A blush colored her cheeks. "We had community dances in Boston." As they moved together, Theresa found herself noticing the strength in Brent's arms, the earnest concentration on his face as he tried not to step on her toes. Despite his claims of gracelessness, there was a natural rhythm to his movements. When he smiled down at her, eyes crinkling at the corners, something fluttered in her chest that had nothing to do with exertion. The evening ended with the pastor saying a brief prayer for the community and offering a special blessing for Mr. Bailey and his intended. The words caused Theresa to stiffen slightly. The arrangement suddenly felt very real. On the ride home, beneath a canopy of stars brighter than she'd ever seen in Boston, Theresa finally asked the question that had been on her mind. "Why did you send for a bride, Mr. Bailey Brent? You seem well respected in town. Surely there were local women who would have made suitable wives." Brent was silent for so long that Theresa wondered if he'd heard her. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "Lost my family young. Spent years drifting, working ranches across the territory. By the time I settled here and built something worth sharing, the local girls were all spoken for." He paused. "And truth be told, I wanted someone who chose me knowing nothing but what I told them in letters. No history, no rumors, no family connections, just me." The irony wasn't lost on Theresa. He wanted honesty while she was living a lie. "I understand wanting a fresh start," she said quietly. Brent glanced at her. "Reckon we both have stories we ain't told yet." The perceptiveness of his comment startled her, but before she could respond, he continued. "Time enough for that. We've got the rest of our lives, according to the preacher." The casual reference to their future together hung between them as the wagon rolled toward the ranch, now visible as a dark silhouette against the starlit sky. The following days fell into a routine as Theresa adjusted to ranch life. She woke early, preparing breakfast while Brent tended to the livestock. The kitchen work was a challenge, but one she tackled with determination. By the end of the first week, her biscuits were actually rising properly, and she had mastered the temperamental wood stove. Brent noticed her efforts and appreciated them, though he could see the strain in her fine hands, now reddened from work and water. One evening, he returned from the barn to find her applying a salve to cracked skin. "Got something better for that," he said, startling her. From a cabinet, he retrieved a tin of ointment. Made from lanolin and beeswax, works wonders on saddle sores and chapped hands alike. Their fingers brushed as he handed her the tin, and neither pulled away immediately. Something shifted in the air between them, a moment of connection that transcended their practical arrangement. "Thank you," Theresa said softly. The next morning, Brent announced he needed to ride to the north pasture to check on a pregnant heifer. "Would you like to come along? Could show you more of the ranch." Theresa's face lit up. "I'd love to." Brent helped her mount his gentlest mare, a dappled gray named Pepper. Though she'd claimed some riding experience in her letters, he suspected it had been on groomed paths in city parks rather than open range. To his surprise, she sat the saddle with natural poise, quickly adjusting to the horse's movements. "You ride well," he observed. "My father insisted I learn," she said, then quickly added, "he believed all proper young ladies should ride." They rode side by side through rolling grassland dotted with sagebrush and wildflowers. In the distance, the Wind River Mountains created a jagged backdrop against the clear blue sky. Theresa's face was animated as she took in the landscape, asking questions about plants and wildlife that revealed genuine curiosity. "It's so vast," she breathed. "In Boston, you can never see this far in any direction." "That's why I love it," Brent said. "Room to breathe. Room to be yourself without anyone crowding you." Theresa considered his words. "Is that why you came west? For freedom?" "Partly. Mostly it was necessity. After my parents died, cholera took them both when I was 15. I had nowhere to go. My uncle took me in, but he was a hard man with too many mouths to feed already. Left when I was 17, worked my way west." "I'm sorry about your parents," Theresa said softly. Brent shrugged. "Long time ago now. What about your family? You don't mention them much in your letters." Theresa's expression closed slightly. "There's not much to tell. My mother died when I was young. My father and I weren't close. It wasn't entirely a lie. Her father, Theresa Greene, had indeed been distant, focused on building his shipping empire rather than raising a daughter. What she omitted was his recent death, and the fortune he'd left her, the fortune that had made her a target. They found the heifer grazing contentedly, her sides swollen with calf. Brent dismounted to check on her, speaking softly as he approached. The gentleness with which this strong man handled the animal touched Theresa deeply. On their return journey, they stopped by a clear stream for the horses to drink. Sitting on a sun-warmed rock, sharing jerky and biscuits Brent had packed, Theresa felt a peace she hadn't known in months. "Can I ask you something, Theresa?" She tensed slightly. "Of course. Why did you really come west? A woman with your education, your manner, you could have found a position in any eastern city." Theresa looked away, watching the water burble over stones. "Perhaps I wanted adventure." "And perhaps there's more to it than that," Brent said quietly. "I've noticed things. The way you watch the road when riders approach, how you keep that satchel close, the way you sometimes look over your shoulder like you're expecting someone." Her heart raced. "You're very observant." "Have to be, working with livestock. Animals and people both show signs when they're frightened." He met her eyes directly. "Are you running from something, Theresa?" The concern in his voice nearly undid her. For a wild moment, she considered telling him everything about her father's death. the fortune she'd inherited, and her cousin Richard's increasingly threatening attempts to force her into marriage to gain control of the Greene shipping empire. Instead, she said, we all have reasons for seeking new beginnings. I came west honestly, Brent. I did want to start fresh. He studied her face, then nodded slowly. Fair enough. Just want you to know that whatever you're running from, if you are running, you're safe here now. The simple declaration brought unexpected tears to her eyes. How long had it been since she'd felt truly safe? At night, as she counted the gold coins hidden beneath the floorboard, Theresa found herself wondering what Brent would think if he knew the truth. Would he believe she had come for him, not just to escape Richard? Because even after just a week, she was beginning to care for the quiet, honorable rancher who had opened his home to her. The weeks passed, and summer bloomed across the Wyoming range. Theresa's hands toughened, and her skin bronzed from the sun despite her bonnets and careful precautions. She learned to make soap, churn butter, and even helped deliver a calf when Brent was delayed returning from town. Each evening, they sat on the porch watching the sunset, talking about their days and gradually sharing more of themselves. Theresa was careful with her history, but found herself revealing genuine pieces of her character: her love of poetry, her skill with numbers, her secret enjoyment of adventure stories that proper Boston ladies weren't supposed to read. Brent, in turn, shared his dreams for the ranch, stories of his travels before settling in Sweetwater, and occasionally, memories of his parents. In the lengthening shadows, their chairs seemed to inch closer together of their own accord. One evening, as they watched a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Brent cleared his throat. Been thinking, he said. We've known each other nearly a month now. Theresa's heart quickened. Yes. Preacher Parker asks every Sunday when we're making it official. He turned to look at her directly. I told him that's up to you. No rush still holds true. Theresa met his gaze. In the golden light, his eyes were warm and sincere. Over the weeks, she had come to admire this man, his integrity, his quiet strength, the gentleness that balanced his rugged exterior. The thought of becoming his wife no longer felt like a necessary arrangement, but something she genuinely desired. I think, she said carefully, that I would be honored to marry you, Brent Bailey, if the offer still stands. The smile that transformed his face made her breath catch. Without speaking, he reached for her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. Never wanted anything more, he said simply. The moment hung between them, charged with unspoken emotions. Brent leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, Theresa closed the distance, meeting his lips with her own. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Brent's arm circled her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, both breathing quickly, Theresa felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. This was what she had crossed a continent to find, not just safety but connection. Sunday then? Brent asked, his voice husky. After services. Theresa nodded, unable to speak past the emotion tightening her throat. The news of their impending wedding spread through Sweetwater like wildfire. Martha Wilson and the other women descended on the ranch with offers of help, suggestions for the ceremony, and not-so-subtle inquiries about Theresa's wedding dress. I have something suitable, Theresa assured them, thinking of the silk gown packed in her trunk. It was meant for formal dinners rather than weddings, but it would serve the purpose. The day before the wedding, Brent rode into town for last-minute supplies and to collect the simple gold band he'd ordered. Theresa used the time alone to finally unpack her finest dress, shaking out the wrinkles from its long confinement. As she held it up, she realized it represented her old life, the wealthy merchant's daughter who had fled Boston in fear. The woman who would marry Brent Bailey tomorrow was different, stronger, more self-sufficient, and genuinely in love. The dress suddenly seemed wrong. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She hastily concealed the gown under a quilt before answering. Martha Wilson stood on the porch with a large parcel. "Afternoon, dear. Brought you something." Inside the package was a wedding dress, simple but elegant, made of cream-colored cotton with delicate embroidery around the collar and cuffs. "It was my daughter's," Martha explained. "She's out in California now with 3 little ones of her own. Thought you might like to wear it since your trunks came with so little." Emotion welled in Theresa's throat. "Mrs. Wilson, I don't know what to say. It's beautiful." "You make our Brent happy," the older woman said simply. "That's payment enough." After Martha left, Theresa tried on the dress. It fit as if made for her. Looking in the small mirror, she hardly recognized herself. The poised Boston socialite had given way to a woman with sun-kissed cheeks and a genuine smile. She decided then that her secret fortune would remain hidden a while longer. She wanted Brent to marry her, not her money. Once they were truly established as husband and wife, she would find the right moment to tell him everything. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. The small church in Sweetwater was packed with ranchers, townspeople, and their families. Brent stood at the altar looking uncommonly neat in a new shirt and his best Sunday coat, his usually unruly hair slicked down with water. When Theresa entered on Sheriff Collins' arm, standing in for her absent father, a hush fell over the congregation. Brent's face as he watched her approach was a study in wonder and devotion that made her heart soar. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When Preacher Parker pronounced them man and wife, Brent's kiss was both reverent and promising. The cheers of the community surrounded them as they turned to face their new life together. The celebration afterward featured a feast contributed by every household in the area. There was dancing in the churchyard, children running with ribbons, and enough good wishes to last a lifetime. As the afternoon waned, Brent found Theresa sitting with some of the women. "Ready to head home, Mrs. Bailey?" he asked, the new name carrying a weight of emotion in his voice. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both of them aware of the shift in their relationship. No longer mail-order bride and cautious rancher, but husband and wife. The thought brought both nervousness and anticipation. As they approached the ranch, Brent suddenly pulled the wagon to a stop. Before Theresa could question him, he had jumped down and come around to her side. With surprising strength, he lifted her from the seat. "Brent," she gasped, arms instinctively circling his neck. "Carrying my bride over the threshold," he explained with a smile. "It's tradition." The simple romantic gesture touched her deeply. This man, who had survived hardship and built a life through sheer determination, had a gentle heart beneath his rugged exterior. That night, as husband and wife, they discovered each other with tenderness and growing passion. In Brent's arms, Theresa found a belonging she had never known possible. The secrets she still kept seemed to fade in importance compared to the truth of what they were building together. In the quiet aftermath, lying in the darkness with her head on his chest, Theresa made a decision. Tomorrow, she would tell him everything. No more secrets between them. But tomorrow brought unexpected visitors. Theresa was preparing breakfast when she heard the sound of approaching horses. Through the window, she saw 3 men riding toward the ranch, strangers, well dressed in a way that immediately set them apart from the local ranchers. Cold fear washed through her. She knew before seeing their faces. Richard had found her. Brent came in from the barn, alerted by the same sounds. "Expecting visitors?" he asked, then saw her pale face. "Theresa, what's wrong?" Before she could answer, a knock came at the door. Brent moved to answer it, but Theresa grabbed his arm. "Wait," she whispered urgently. I need to tell you something first. Those men, the knocking became more insistent. Brent gently disengaged her fingers. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. He opened the door to reveal a slender man in an expensive Eastern suit, flanked by two larger men with the hard eyes of hired muscle. The leader removed his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Good morning. I'm looking for Theresa Greene. I understand she's residing here." Brent's posture stiffened. "You're speaking to Mrs. Brent Bailey, and you are." The man's eyebrows rose slightly at the title. "Richard Blackwell of Boston. Miss Greene's cousin and legal guardian." "I have no legal guardian," Theresa said, moving to stand beside Brent. "I'm 26 years old and a married woman." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "A hasty arrangement, I'm sure, one that can be easily annulled when we return to Boston." "She's not going anywhere," Brent said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I'm afraid that's not your decision, Mr. Bailey. Theresa is unwell, grief-stricken by her father's death and not thinking clearly. She fled Boston with a substantial sum of money before proper arrangements could be made for her care." Theresa felt Brent's gaze shift to her, questioning. "That's not true," she said firmly. "I left because you tried to force me to marry you to get control of my inheritance." Richard sighed dramatically. "You see, paranoid delusions." The doctor was quite concerned. "Get off my property," Brent said flatly. Richard's facade of politeness dropped. "I don't think you understand the situation. This woman is worth over $500,000. She's coming with us willingly or otherwise." The two men behind him shifted their coats to reveal pistols at their waists. Brent, unarmed, nonetheless moved to shield Theresa. "Last warning," he said. "Leave now." "Actually," came a new voice from behind the men, "that's my line." Sheriff Collins sat on his horse at the edge of the yard, rifle balanced casually across his saddle. Behind him were three more men, ranchers Brent had worked with for years. "Morning, Brent, Mrs. Bailey," the sheriff nodded. "These gentlemen bothering you?" Richard turned, assessing the new arrivals. "This is a family matter, Sheriff. Miss Greene, Mrs. Bailey," the sheriff corrected. "Married her myself yesterday as deputy witness. Now, unless you have legal papers from a Wyoming territory court, I suggest you follow Mr. Bailey's request and move along." A tense silence followed. Richard's men looked to him for direction, hands hovering near their weapons. "I wouldn't," advised one of the ranchers, his own rifle now visible. "Sheriff's a fair man, but he takes exception to folks drawing on his friends." Richard's cold gaze fell on Theresa. "This isn't finished. That money belongs to the Greene family business." "And I am a Greene," Theresa replied steadily. "The last one. The business and the money are legally mine to do with as I please." With a final venomous look, Richard gestured to his men. They mounted their horses and rode away, the sheriff and one rancher following to ensure they left the territory. When they were gone, Brent turned to Theresa, his expression unreadable. $500,000, she nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "My father built a shipping empire. When he died 3 months ago, he left everything to me. Richard, his sister's son, expected to inherit or at least control it through me." She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you." Brent was silent for so long that Theresa finally looked up. To her surprise, he didn't appear angry, just thoughtful. "Is that why you answered my advertisement?" "For protection. At first," she admitted. "I needed to disappear where Richard couldn't find me. But Brent, I grew to care for you through your letters and these past weeks." She reached for his hand. "I love you. The money doesn't matter." "Matters to some," he said quietly. "Explains a few things, though. Your fine clothes, the way you held yourself, wasn't just education." "Are you angry?" Brent considered the question. "Not angry." Just wondering if you'd have looked twice at a simple rancher if you hadn't been running scared." The doubt in his voice broke her heart. "I chose you, Brent Bailey. From all the advertisements, I chose yours because your words were honest and kind. I came west to escape Richard, yes, but I married you because I fell in love with you." He searched her face, looking for truth. Whatever he saw there made his expression soften. "What happens now? Your cousin won't give up easy." "No," she agreed, "but I've taken precautions. The money is in several banks under different names. Even Richard can't touch it without proper documentation, which would require my presence and consent." Brent shook his head in amazement. "My wife, the strategist." "Your wife," she repeated, hope rising at his use of the term. "Still, even knowing everything," he pulled her into his arms. "Said till death do us part yesterday. Meant it." Relief washed through her as she returned his embrace. "The money is ours now, Brent. We could expand the ranch, build a bigger house." He silenced her with a gentle finger to her lips. "Don't need a fortune to be happy, Theresa. Just need you." He paused, considering. "Though I wouldn't say no to some better breeding stock come spring." She laughed, the tension of the morning dissolving. "Practical as always, Mr. Bailey. One of us has to be, Mrs. Bailey." The weeks following Richard's visit were tense, but as summer turned to fall with no further sign of her cousin, Theresa gradually relaxed. She and Brent settled into married life, working side by side to prepare the ranch for winter. With Brent's blessing, Theresa wrote to her lawyer in Boston, arranging for a portion of her fortune to be transferred to a bank in Cheyenne under both their names. The remainder would stay distributed and hidden until they were certain Richard had given up his pursuit. The improvements to the ranch were subtle at first: better tools, additional hands hired for the harvest, a new stove that didn't smoke when the wind was from the east. Brent remained adamant that they live within the means the ranch provided, using Theresa's money only for necessary investments. "Don't want folks saying I married you for your fortune," he explained. "No one who knows you would ever think that," Theresa assured him. "You loved me before you knew about the money." It was true. In the quiet moments between them, waking together in the morning light, working side by side in the garden, sitting on the porch watching stars emerge, there was a depth of feeling that had nothing to do with wealth or status. As winter approached, Theresa discovered she was expecting their first child. The news brought Brent to his knees beside her chair, his face awestruck as he placed a gentle hand on her still, flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby." The months of pregnancy passed peacefully. Theresa blossomed in the role of rancher's wife and expectant mother. The women of Sweetwater rallied around her, sharing advice and helping prepare for the new arrival. Martha Wilson began knitting baby clothes before Theresa had even announced her condition publicly. "A woman knows these things," she said with a wink when Theresa expressed surprise. Spring brought not only wildflowers to the prairie, but also news from Boston. Richard Blackwell had been arrested for embezzlement from other family investments. Without access to Theresa's inheritance, he had turned to increasingly desperate measures to maintain his lifestyle and had been caught. The threat he posed was finally, truly over. On a perfect May morning with sunshine streaming through the bedroom window, Theresa gave birth to a son. He had Brent's strong features and her chestnut hair, a perfect blend of them both. "Thomas Theodore Bailey," Theresa suggested as she cradled the newborn, "after both our fathers." Brent, overwhelmed with emotion, could only nod as he sat beside them on the bed, one large finger captured in his son's tiny fist. That evening, with the baby sleeping peacefully in the cradle Brent had crafted, they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, a tradition they had maintained throughout their marriage. "I've been thinking," Brent said, his arm around her shoulders. Maybe we should use some of that fortune of yours to build a proper school for Sweetwater. Town's growing, more families moving in. Our boy will need education someday." Theresa smiled. "I think that's a wonderful idea, and perhaps a small hospital too." Martha was saying Mrs. Johnson had to travel all the way to Cheyenne when her appendix burst last winter. Brent nodded thoughtfully. "Could do a lot of good with that money." "We already have everything that matters," Theresa said, leaning against him. "A home, a family, each other." "Who'd have thought a desperate mail-order bride and a lonely rancher would end up here?" Brent mused. "I wasn't that desperate," Theresa protested with a laugh. Brent grinned. "And I wasn't that lonely, just waiting for the right woman to find me." As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, Theresa reflected on the journey that had brought her west. She had come seeking safety and found love instead. The fortune that had once been a burden was now a blessing they could share with their community. In the end, it wasn't gold or property that had given her life meaning, but the love of a good man who had wanted her for herself alone. And as Brent's lips found hers in the gathering twilight, Theresa knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. 5 years later, the Bailey Ranch had grown into one of the most prosperous in the territory. The original cabin had been expanded to accommodate their growing family. Thomas had been joined by a sister, Emma, and another baby was on the way. A school and small hospital now served the Sweetwater community, funded largely by the Baileys but built by the collective effort of the townsfolk. Brent and Theresa's partnership had become legendary in the area, the hard-working rancher and his equally determined wife, who had transformed not just their own fortunes, but those of the entire community. Few remembered or cared about the unusual circumstances of their meeting, or the wealth that had followed Theresa from the East. What people saw instead was their obvious devotion to each other evident in every glance, every touch, every shared decision. The love that had grown between the mail-order bride with a secret fortune and the cowboy who had loved her before he knew about the money had only deepened with time, becoming the solid foundation upon which they built their life together. And on summer evenings, they still sat together on the porch, watching the sunset and counting their true wealth in moments shared, and memories made a tradition they would continue for all the years to come.